Hi, Bessie. Taking a look at your assignment here. If you can, please put it to stepped because I think we're going to find more success looking at these things as poses than trying to get the motion going along with the poses at the same time. Um, Hopefully you're comfortable with that. I'm going to try to identify what the key poses are here. I'm going to say this is your contact pose, although maybe that's not true. I'm going to say this is a down pose. This is a passing pose. And then this is your other contact pose. And then in between here, this is just an in-between pose. But ideally, this pose and this pose should be the same. You know, just mirrors of each other. And that way you only really have to focus on, 4 poses at the beginning, and we don't have to focus on the whole thing as animation. It's you just have to take the values from like one foot, put them onto the other foot. You can just copy the entirety of this pose here and then just swap stuff. Let me know if that doesn't make sense. I can clarify more. But let's talk about things. I think, okay, so I would get the pelvis rotation involved in this. I want to see, like this would be the side that we're seeing now. So then it reveals sort of the back of the pelvis a little bit more here. So we're seeing it rotate as this front leg like reaches forward here. I like that it's straight here. I would also recommend working with a ground plane if you're not. I notice that like it's kind of hard to determine where your ground actually is because it feels like the foot keeps coming down. So if this, let me use a different color. If this is the actual ground plane, sorry, where the foot is kind of looks like it's reaching its lowest point, I'm going to delete this one. Just for example, like this foot then isn't contacting the ground. It would be down there. So it would be nice just to make sure that everything here is true to having a ground plane. Put in a ground plane or make it visible. I think there was one that came in with a file, but you can make your own. Just a suggestion. Okay, so if this is your contact pose here, I think that we need to see the weight still on this back foot. And this back foot feels like it has no weight on it anymore. So we kind of want to see like a toe bend in here, which like there's a little control on the rig like that you can use to adjust the bend of the toe. And then also from this pose, it feels like your legs just, I like to see this leg straighter here, but in this pose it feels like a little hyperextended or a little too straight. If you rotate the pelvis, it's going to give you a little bit more room, to get this straight. But maybe also your pelvis needs to be down. Like this should be one of the lower points, not the lowest. The contact pose, the lowest point of the pelvis, and you are bringing it down here. So maybe you just need to adjust it down a little bit here to get the length that you need to get the legs in the proper poses. If I'm saying this is your contact, which I will, I'm going to call this the contact pose. This foot should be totally flat on the ground because now it's taken like the full weight of the body. You're going to see just a tiny little bend out of this leg. And then, yeah, this is where this foot, I think, would like pick up off the ground. And again, these drawings aren't meant to be like this is exactly where I want you to put the foot or anything. It's more just like talking about the concepts and ideas. The pelvis should still be like a little rotated, probably a little less rotated as it's starting to like pull the hips, back more parallel with the camera. But yeah, the forward lean that you have here is great. So thank you for, I don't know if I gave you that note last week, but it looks great here. I really like it. All right, so let's talk about your passing pose. This is supposed to be the highest, but again, if I'm looking at like where I think your ground plane is, like this is where it is in the previous one, and so now it's here. So I don't know, either here your foot's going to be down through the floor, or here your foot's going to be floating up off the floor. But this pose is pretty nice. It's pretty successful. Yeah, I would maybe start opening up the hips a little, but that's pretty nitpicky, so don't worry about it. Okay, so the passing pose here, I think we would start to see a bend out of this, whoops, a slight bend developing out of this leg as the pelvis goes down to kind of hit the same height here. And then, yeah, like, I don't know where the ground is. But the general pose idea here is good. I just want to see a little bit bend out of this leg at this point. And then this front foot here, I think we would also see still kind of a bend out of this leg at this point. And then we want to see this foot not quite so parallel with the ground. It's still kind of transitioning from this angle, which is great. And eventually we know that we're going to have to put it into this angle. But I think we should favor on the passing pose something like this than something as flat as this. Or maybe it's just too far forward and the angle that you have is fine. But I feel like this frame needs a little bit more, this pose, this drawing needs a little bit more attention. And also the hips would start to do the rotation here as well. And then this pose, yeah, should look sort of like a mirror of this pose when you get it worked out. Just flop the legs and everything. Okay, cool. You did put in a front view, so I'm going to talk about that. But yeah, so again, encouraging the stepped work so that we're not distracted by all of this crazy interpolating that the computer is giving you. It'll let us focus on getting like really solid poses in there, and yeah, I think that'll serve us better. So here, if I'm trying to identify the same poses, we'll go in 2 frames forward because the other one was 2 frames forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. 1, 2, 3. Right. 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. So this pose and this pose are supposed to be mirrors. Okay, so one thing I'm noticing here, because we don't have a ground plane, like we're really getting a lot of change in height, like up and down, which is good to have the pelvis, you know, like I've been saying in class, it's good to have that motion, but it's hard to evaluate like what's appropriate, what an appropriate amount of change is there, because the legs aren't grounded, you know what I mean? And I think it's why it looks, if you play this, kind of does that big jump up right there and stuff. I think once we get a ground plane in there and you get the feet grounded at the same level, some of this stuff is gonna be much more easy to see what the solution is or what the solve should be. But I do really like these foot poses and the angles that you have them at. I like that you broke it up for not being straight at the camera. You know, you got a little side-to-side rotation in here. Yeah, and then we can evaluate some of these poses maybe a little bit easier once we get a ground plane, get it unstepped, and start looking at this as poses. So let's start really trying to lock down these 4 poses. Let's lock these down, make them super solid, make them grounded on the ground plane, and then mirror them so that we get 4 more poses over here, you know, and then we should have 8 really solid poses. We'll talk about those in your next review, and then we can move forward with breakdowns and everything. But yeah, great work. Keep it up, and see you next week.